Good afternoon. I'm going to call this meeting of Assembly Revenue to order. Madam Secretary, please take the roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Bilberry Axelrod. Assemblywoman Considine.
Present.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller. Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblyman Orentlicker.
Here.
Assemblyman Roberts. Assemblyman Yeager. Chair Cohen.
And I am present. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please mark the members who are absent, excused, and mark them present if they should arrive from their other hearings. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Oh, and just for the record, we do have a quorum with us 8 members here. So just some housekeeping. Members and presenters, please remember to silence your electronic devices. And then just note that members will be using our laptops and possibly other devices to review materials, exhibits, that type of thing. So please don't take that as a sign of disrespect. Then we will have public comment at the end of the hearing. Public comment may be limited in time to 2 minutes. And then as a reminder, pursuant to rule number 54 of the Assembly Standing Rules, if you testify in support of a bill or resolution, it means that you approve it as written or with an amendment that has been approved by the sponsor. Opposition of a bill or resolution is not supporting the measure as written or with any amendment that has been approved by the sponsor, and a neutral position on a bill or a resolution is one in which you are offering no particular insights on the measure but express no position on the member. So as an example, if you love a bill or resolution but want to change something and you haven't gotten the authorization for an amendment that's been accepted by the sponsor, you must testify in opposition, but please feel free to tell us how much you love the bill. So with that, we're going to move on to the bill presentations, and the order we're going to go in, but we may change this, but for now it's going to be SB 278, SB 442, and SCR 11. So I'm now going to open up the hearing on SB 278, which revises provisions relating to taxation of cannabis, and ask our bill presenter to come forward. Oh. Okay. Sorry, I assumed you weren't going to be here, Senator. Welcome. And please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Senator James Settlemeyer, District 17. We have a habit, as we know, to try to watch the TV and try to slip in at the right proper time, just in case you have other bills that you need to have heard first. Anyway, Senate Bill 278, as we brought it forward and as amended, defines wholesale sales or sales or transfers of cannabis by a cannabis cultivation facility to another cannabis establishment. The bill as amended excludes from the definition of wholesale sale a transfer of cannabis by a cannabis cultivation facility to another cannabis cultivation facility when both facilities share identical ownership. As with most businesses, we run into situations where people have sub-businesses, so they're selling clones or plants to one another. That should not trigger the taxation. It should just be at the endpoint sale. So in that respect, that's what the bill does. It's effective July 1st, 2021, unless you guys change it around. But with that, I'd gladly take any questions, or if it would be acceptable, Madam Chair, if we could have Mr. Adler present as well, that might be able to clear up anything that's hazy.
Please go ahead, Mr. Adler.
Thank you. Will Adler representing Sierra Cannabis Coalition today. To clear up any haziness, as the good senator said, with what we're doing here today and why we're bringing it forward, the initial language around cannabis and cannabis taxation came from the ballot initiative that passed in 2016 and referred to recreational cannabis and when the wholesale tax would or would not be applied. The language there was a little clunky, and it kind of implied whenever there's any transference or transportation of cannabis out of that cultivation facility, the wholesale tax must be applied. applied. So to clarify that, if you own 2 cultivation facilities as a single group, and in this case have an identical ownership structure, that there shouldn't be any problem with doing just general business practices of taking it from one of your cultivation facilities to another to do, packaging or some sort of secondary, manipulation of the product to get it ready for sale, and then have the sale and sales, and then hence the wholesale tax be applied once it leaves the second or final facility when the products are finalized. And that's essentially what we're trying to accomplish here, and it should be a nice, clean bill after Department of Taxation's amendment on the other side. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair and Senator, and for the presentation. It does seem pretty straightforward. I just wanted to clarify on this section here, owned by the same individual. Would that count if it's in-state or out-of-state? So if you have a cultivation facility in California and one here, or would this only be applying to in-state?
Assemblywoman Kasama, to this day, marijuana is still federally illegal and has no ability to actually be transported between states. So even if you owned a cultivation in California and one in Nevada, you could not transport any of it ever between either of those properties because it is still federally illegal, and that crosses that state barrier. So it's just for in-state operations only in the state of Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you. That makes sense. If it becomes federally legal, should we be proactive in maybe having it clarify that it's in state?
Looking to the future, if federal legalization does happen, Will Adler for the record, speaking again, looking forward in the future, if there is federal legalization, I think there's going to be a lot of syncing up between states regardless of what Nevada does.
There'll be a lot of cleanup.
And we're going to have to figure out what is or isn't, a cultivation at a federal level and between states at some point. So, yeah.
Makes
yes.
sense. All right. Thank you.
This is Senator Sotomayor for the record. As indicated, I think you hit the nail on the head there, that if the federal government ever legalizes, you will probably see them come forth with some regulations that all states will have to adopt to the supremacy clause.
I have a question from Assemblywoman Considine. Oh, did you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I have 2 questions. One of them is from my Assemblywoman colleague over there. She brought up the identical ownership. What do you mean by identical ownership? 100% identical, 80% identical? Can you give me kind of 5 people out of 7? What does that mean?
So, Will Adler for the record. You may wish to speak to the Department of Taxation for their definition as well, but how we came to identical here was truly identical ownership, like 100% the same ownership, because the cannabis industry does have a lot of co-owners of pieces of one piece of, this cultivation, one piece of another, and we didn't want any lack of clarity between, what is or isn't allowable. So identical ownership keeps the tax structure under that one ownership group, and ultimately means that, regardless of where this wholesale tax does get applied, the Department of Taxation, as far as I understood, felt comfortable saying as long as it's within one group, identical ownership, 100%, they felt like this could be applied, this correction to the wholesale tax could be applied. So, Will Adler.
Thank you. Chair, may I ask a second question? Or you want me to
Yeah.
wait?
Do you want to confirm with Director Young? Director Young, do you have a response to that?
Yes, thank you, Melanie Young, Executive Director for the Nevada Department of Taxation. And we would look at this as 100% ownership. So we concur with Mr. Adler's testimony.
And if I may, before Assemblywoman Considine asks her next question, Director, so when you're talking about 100%, are we just talking about the same owners, or what if they're the same owners but different? They each own different percentages in the different businesses. What would happen then?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Cohen, for the question. Melanie Young, Executive Director for the record. We would look at it as the same exact ownership. And I'm not sure if we would look at how far into the percentages of each one of them, but as long as the same ownership was 100%, same individuals.
Thank you for that. Assemblywoman, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then my other question is, are there any other industries in Nevada that have this type of setup where there is a transfer of some product from one facility to another? And if so, is this have the same setup for the taxation?
This is Senator Settlemyre. I can only speak to the other industry that I'm familiar with, which is agriculture. Yes. Within agriculture, if I have my father and myself, if we owned cattle and we both own the same ownership, but we transfer them to one another, there is no taxation until you get to the end point of sale. And that's traditionally how agriculture works. So I can only speak as to that. Also within garlic, I know the same thing has occurred on Snyder Corporation and others such that nature, such as Perry's. So again, I can only speak to ag. However, the director may be able to give you far more details, or if my friend over here has any more information on that. But I think the director might be the best one to see if there are other similarities beyond what I know.
Will Adler, for the record, I can speak to, we base the cannabis taxation sort of roughly, I will say, base the taxation off of the alcohol wholesale program. So you have the initial producer of the alcohol that you then apply the wholesale tax prior to that transportation, or the wholesaler actually is in charge of the taxes there. And then that is paid before it ever goes to the retail outlet, right? So that's essentially the same with cannabis here, where we want to make sure the cultivation is paying the wholesale tax. So in cannabis, and from the origin of the cannabis, we said that wholesale tax needs to be paid before it leaves your cultivation facility. And we know that tax has been applied because it can go two ways. It go to the production facility, or it could go to a dispensary, right? So it was just a check to say you're responsible for this before it leaves your facility. And it kind of was similar to the alcohol model when we came up with it, as far as I know, what we based it upon, but it's not exactly the same. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mr. Adler. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Any other questions, committee? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move on to support, unless you gentlemen have anything else to add. Well, okay, we will go on to support in the room. So anyone in the room in support, please come forward. Okay, seeing none, I don't think we have anyone on Zoom, but let's go on to support on the phones, please.
To testify in support on a Senate Bill 278, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to testify in support to Senate Bill 278, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we do not have any callers at this time wishing to provide testimony in support.
Thank you, BPS. Anyone in opposition in the room? Okay, seeing none, and I don't think we have anyone on Zoom. Anyone on the phones in opposition?
If you would like to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 278, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we do not have any callers wishing to provide opposition at this time.
Thank you, BPS. Anyone in neutral in the room? Okay, seeing none and no one in neutral. Director Young, did you have anything you wanted to add in neutral? Or are you just answering questions?
Thank you, Melanie Young, Executive Director. For the record, we are neutral on this bill and don't have anything further to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Okay, so seeing no one else in neutral on the Zoom, we'll go to neutral on the phone.
If you would like to provide neutral testimony to Senate Bill 278, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we do not have any callers at this time wishing to provide neutral testimony.
Thank you, BPS. With that, we will, gentlemen, if you have any closing statements you'd like to make, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Settlemyre, for the record, if there's any questions or concerns that you may have, please do not hesitate to reach out and give me a call, and I'll try to address any and all concerns that come forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I will close the hearing on SB 278 and open the hearing on SB 442. I'm sure I've got, yes, okay. SB 442 prospectively eliminates the program to provide a partial abatement of property taxes for certain buildings and structures which meet certain energy efficiency standards. Director and, I'm sorry, I forgot your title. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David Bobstein for the record, Director of the Governor's Office of Energy. With me today is Robin Yoakum, who's the Energy Program Manager for all things energy efficiency, including the Green Building Tax Abatement Program. Thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity this afternoon to present this legislation, which is a budget bill, part of the Governor's recommended budget. And from a high level, this is for a sunsetting of the Green Building Tax Abatement Program. Program Manager Yoakum will walk you through the specifics of our rationale for why it is time to sunset this program, but the top line takeaway is that building codes, the Energy Efficiency Code, has reached a level, is rapidly reaching a level of efficiency that eclipses the need for this program. In other words, the required standard for new construction, we're entering a space where there's no need to provide incentives to projects that are building to this minimum code. So with this legislation and the retirement of the program, we will see a long-term return of revenues that otherwise would have been abated to many local governments across the state. So we are pleased to present this for your consideration. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Yoakum to give you the really intelligent part of this presentation with a much higher level of expertise than I can offer today.
Please go ahead, Program Manager Yoakum.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Cohen. So good afternoon, and Chair Cohen and members of the committee. Robin Yoakum for the record, Energy Program Manager with the Governor's Office of Energy. So thank you again for allowing us to present this bill to you today. So before we review the Green Building Tax Abatement Program, I want to give you some context about the International Energy Conservation Code, or IECC. So NRS 701.220 directs the Governor's Office of Energy to adopt the most recently published version of the IECC every 3 years. So each iteration of the IECC increases the efficiency of newly constructed commercial and residential buildings. The 2012 IECC was more efficient than the 2009, the 2015 slightly more efficient than the 2012, but when it came to the 2018 IECC, it was determined to be 16% more efficient than the 2012. Showing one of the largest increases in efficiency in the different iterations of the IECC. So our office adopted the 2018 IECC in July of 2018 and is in the process of adopting the 2021 IECC, which is actually about 10% more efficient than the 2018, which is 26% more efficient than the 2012. So what this means is that upon adoption of the 2021, we will be 26% more efficient than the baseline, which is the 2012 IECC, and that is what the rating systems use as their baseline for comparison in order to participate in our program. So once the 2021 IECC is adopted, abatements will be awarded for projects that construct to the state-adopted code. As you are all aware, our office, along with multiple state agencies, participated in the development of the state climate strategy. In the strategy, the continued adoption of energy codes was analyzed, and it was determined that energy codes are instrumental in achieving Nevada's climate goals. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, energy codes are projected to save U.S. homes and businesses about $126 billion between 2012 and 2040, and these numbers were calculated with the assumption that new updated codes would continue to be adopted. So there are multiple benefits to adopting the most recent version of the IECC, and these are just a few examples. Lower energy bills for Nevadans, healthier indoor environments, energy-efficient homes and businesses for decades, and it assists in meeting the state climate goals. So now we're going to dive into the GBTA program and how energy codes have a role in awarding the abatements. In 2005, the GBTA program was enacted to address an energy market substantially different than today's. It provided an incentive to business owners to increase the efficiency of the built environment within the state in an effort to bring new businesses and jobs into Nevada. NRS 701A.100 specifies that the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, or otherwise known as LEED, rating system or equivalent is the rating system in which projects are required to certify in order to receive the abatement. In 2013, GOE adopted through regulation the Green Globes rating system as an equivalent rating system for certification. The points achieved in the new construction rating system utilized the 2012 IECC or ASHRAE 90.1-2010 standard as that baseline for comparison to award the specific energy points as dictated in NRS 701A.100 and NRS 701A.110. Existing buildings are compared to a national database of comparison properties known as the Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey, or CBEX, which is provided by the Energy Information Administration. It's important to note that most of the comparison properties in that system were built prior to 1980. As mentioned earlier, the IECC increases the required efficiency of newly constructed buildings every 3 years when published. The continuance of the GBTA program after the 2021 IECC has been adopted will allow owners to receive an abatement for building to the minimum standard already adopted in the state, thus no longer aligning with the intent of the program as initially established in NRS. Upon adoption of the 2018 IECC by the Governor's Office of Energy, local jurisdictions followed suit, and the largest populated areas in the state have adopted the same. By July 2020, 47% of the jurisdictions in the state had adopted the 2018 IECC, which represents 96.5% of Nevada's population. So this slide just shows which jurisdictions, counties, and municipalities have adopted the 2018 IECC, which includes Clark, Washoe, Story, Carson City, Douglas, Elko, and Nye, all of whom have had one or more projects in their jurisdiction that has been awarded an abatement. So in this slide, we wanted to show the different counties and the percentage of projects that have been awarded an abatement. As you can see, 81% of the projects are in Clark County, with over half of those projects being a resort casino type of project. 14% are in Washoe, with 5% in the other 4 counties, or 5 counties. So again, abatements are awarded for achieving certification through either the LEED or Green Globes rating systems per current statute. And out of 221 projects, 85 have been awarded an abatement utilizing the LEED rating system, and 136 projects have utilized the Green Globes rating system. As you can see, this covers over 210 million square feet of building stock. This next slide shows the fiscal impact of the abatements to the counties and municipalities where the abatements have been awarded. An estimated $275 million of property taxes will have been abated over the life of the program, and the largest portion of those dollars, $250 million, will be from Clark County. So upon adoption of the 2018 IECC, GOE recognized a need to evaluate the efficacy of the GBTA program as the adoption of more efficient codes would continue. So we contracted with a neutral third-party vendor who possessed experience in green building practices and the IECC. The vendor evaluated the relationship of the minimum energy efficiency levels required to achieve the specified energy points in comparison to both the 2018 IECC and the 2021 IECC. This analysis was emailed to the committee yesterday. I believe it's up on Nellis, and in a few slides we'll have a graph that shows this comparison. So during the analysis performed, it was noted that upon adoption of the 2018 IECC, the first tier for the abatement for new construction was simply compliant with the required codes. In a few slides, I will show you that graph. So, it was apparent that a significant tax abatement can be achieved by constructing to the current minimum energy code requirements adopted by Nevada. So under current statute, the abatements are awarded based on optimized energy points achieved and the overall level, whether it's silver, gold, or platinum. The energy points dictate the term of the abatement, which are calculated based on a percentage of improvement over the baseline of the 2012 IECC, or ASHRAE 90.1-2010 standard. To receive at least 5 points, depending on the project type, the project must achieve an improvement between 7 to 14% over the baseline. 7 points requires an 11 to 18% improvement above the baseline, and 11 points would require 19 to 26% above the baseline. So those points achieved actually dictate the term of the abatement. So in order to achieve the highest level, as you saw in the prior slide, the project is required to achieve between a 19 to 26% improvement. This equates to achieving the platinum level and would receive a 35% abatement for 10 years. 15% of the projects have achieved the lowest level, 61% of the projects have achieved gold level, and 19% have achieved the platinum level. This is important as most of the projects have achieved a gold level or equivalent. And sorry for stuttering, I noticed a typo on my slides. So here's a graph showing the comparison of the baselines and adopted codes. This graph depicts the minimum and maximum required percentage of improvements over the baseline to achieve the required points. As you can see in the green bar, the minimum percentages range from 7 to 19%, and the dark blue bar ranges from 14 to 26%. The light blue bar is actually comparing the 2018 IECC against the minimum and the maximum percentages of improvement, with the final beige bar comparing the 2021 IECC against the minimum and maximums. So the percentages differ between project types, which is why there is an overlap in the 5 and the 7 energy points. So with the adoption of the 2018, achieving 5 points awards an abatement for being less efficient than the 2018 IECC, which is again only 15% of the projects. While the 7 points represent 61% of the projects, which is neither below the 2018 IECC or it could be slightly higher, depending on the points achieved. And upon adoption of the 2021, these projects are 8% less efficient than the 2021 IECC. So achieving 11 points or higher, which represents, again, 19% of the projects, achieves a higher level of efficiency over the 2018, but upon adoption of the 2021 IECC, as you can see, achieving the 11 OEP points awards an abatement for being compliant with the state-adopted code. Over the life of the program, less than 15% of the projects eligible for an abatement have achieved a 26% savings over the 2012 IECC. So lastly, we would like to review some of the challenges within the GBTA program. Since the enactment of NRS 701A in 2005, both new construction and existing building projects could participate in the program. However, in 2011, existing buildings were taken out and only new construction projects could apply. The program was drastically modified during the 2007 session to address concerns that had arisen after the enactment of the program. Prior to 2013, there was no cap on the abatement awarded for existing buildings, and after the enactment of AB 33 in 2013, a cap of $100,000 per year was implemented. AB 33 identified that unless there was a cap on existing buildings, the fiscal impact could be significant. There have been multiple challenges with this program since inception, ranging from a potential drain on the local government's budget, which was addressed in AB 33 in 2013, awarding abatements to condominium projects without requiring the owners to continue or improve the efficiency of the condo, and allowing a single building to receive multiple abatements, increasing the amount of abated taxes beyond the established cap. Both of these challenges were addressed through regulation in 2019. If this bill does not pass upon adoption of the 2021 IECC, the state will award abatements to building owners for simply complying to code, or even being less efficient than the adopted code. In 2024, GOE and the local governments will adopt the 2024 IECC, which will again increase the efficiency of the code, perpetuating this cycle. GOE has concluded that the original intent of the program is no longer being met with increased adoption of required energy codes. And with that, we thank you for your time, and we are here for any questions.
Madam Chair, if I might just give 2 more points to our presentation. The first is, you see this is the first reprint of the bill, there was an amendment adopted on the other side. We heard concern from the Nevada Resort Association as to the effective date, which originally was effective upon passage. So we got together with them and determined that essentially a 2-week extension out to July 1, the new fiscal year, would be doable and appropriate. I bring that up to also just sort of paint the picture of what this looks like in terms of the program itself. The pipeline exists, and there will be some projects that probably still come in as long as they're certified or not certified. I'm not getting the terminology correct. If they get the project to us prior to the effective date, we then still have the obligation to process it. But from that point forward, no more projects come in. Similarly, for existing abatements, our staff is still responsible for those projects, and we'll see them through their term. But essentially, by retiring the program after July 1, no new participants in the program itself. I will also say sort of a broader conversation about some concerns we heard on the Senate side. And I think this is where Ms. Yoakum's slide about the history of the problems with this program come into play. There is discussion, and certainly our office is open to a future discussion about how to then provide incentives to induce high-performing buildings on, from an efficiency standpoint, beyond what is required in the IECC. And we do think that there's a space for that, and that's certainly contemplated in the climate strategy. But we figured it was more prudent, given the history of concerns with this program, to just go ahead and conclude this program, start from scratch, and then we can begin anew with future conversations about how to incentivize high-performing buildings above and beyond the IECC. So that was, I think, some point of debate and discussion on the Senate side, but that's where we landed on this, is that it's probably better, just given the history of all the challenges that we've had with this, let's just retire it and then start fresh with another conversation.
Thank you, Director, and thank you, Program Manager Yoakum. So that does raise a question for me. So with starting a new program, are you saying that we've got those efficiencies, that building is efficient and at the level of efficiency that we'd want to see in order to start a new program, or is it going to take some more time before the engineering and science catches up to make that worthwhile for the state?
I would say, thank you for the question, Madam Chair, David Bobson, for the record. I think it's important to note our office's extensive work with the International Energy Conservation Code and how we interact with local governments. So the adoption that GOE does of each version of the code, we adopt it on behalf of the state, but ultimately it's a signal to the local building departments to hopefully follow suit. And as Ms. Yoakum pointed out, we have across the state plenty of history of that happening. Each building department, subject to their own resources and expertise, they have their own adoption process that they have to go through. But we like to think that we lead the way and send the signal as to what high-performing energy efficient construction can look like. So beyond that, there may be opportunity to go above and beyond what that is. And so the consideration might be for a future program that we potentially bring to the legislature for consideration that could expand upon that work. But I think the question is, and how we look at this is primarily, what can we do working with the IECC with that code to make sure that on the ground, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, we're seeing a robust adoption of that. We're seeing broad adoption of best practices in construction to pursue energy efficiency. Your question about where's the future taking us in terms of technology and everything else, there's certainly a robust conversation around building electrification, insulation, energy systems. There's so much in play right now. It's a very exciting time. So we think it's premature to possibly think about another incentive package that would come to you with a revenue piece. But we're just flagging it that may be something that we want to do. But for now, we have lots to do when it comes to just the International Energy Conservation Code and making sure that we're at the leading edge of that here in Nevada.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Vice Chair.
Thanks. And I said this in the Ways and Means hearing when we saw kind of the fiscal part of this, and we're discussing the programs in your department. And so I just wanted to say that it takes, I think, a lot of courage to be able to come forward and say, hey, this is something that we need to address. And this is, we stand up programs with the best of intentions because we're enthusiastic about the programs and we're enthusiastic to give supports. And then when things can play out differently than what might have been imagined when you're sitting on this side of the table, you look back and you can think, is that still driving us towards the stated policy purpose that we had in mind, or did we miss the target in some ways? And I think the thing that is especially good to note about this program is we're kind of putting a program to rest because the rest of the world caught up to us, which is great, right? So what our intentions were and what legislators, when you were one and working on this policy, hoped to see, and the type of change you hoped that would come in the state, we're here. And that's not very often that we get to look at programs and say, guess what? People are running ahead of us now, so we can pull this back, and then we have the opportunity to rethink about what the new environment has for us and how we leapfrog forward again, because I know that's always the intent in the state, is we want to be at the forefront in a good way. So I appreciate this policy conversation a lot.
Madam Chair, through you to the Assemblywoman, David Bobson, for the record, thank you very much for the kind words. It was absolutely that sense of introspection that we brought to this. And yeah, I think that says it very clearly. There's a lot to celebrate with this program, but it has served its purpose, and now it's time to put it to rest, shall we say, and move on to the next chapter. So yes, thank you for your kind words.
Do we have any other questions, committee? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move on to support. Do we have any support in the room? Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and members of the committee. Dagny Stapleton, Executive Director of NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties. We are in support of SB 442. As explained by the State Office of Energy, the Green Building Tax Abatement Program in Nevada is out of date. It currently offers tax abatements for buildings that meet energy standards, which are now the same as building codes in many counties. These abatements, important to counties, these abatements are of local property taxes, which are either the primary or secondary source of revenue for all Nevada's counties. Property taxes fund the many critical functions that counties are responsible for, including local human services, our local justice system, public safety, infrastructure such as roads, wastewater systems and parks, and our elections. The projected dollar amount of these abatements is presented by the Office of Energy of $250 million through 2031. That is a very impactful number. Any abatements granted of tax dollars should ensure that there is a true incentive and benefit created in Nevada's communities. This is no longer the case for green building abatements in terms of how this program is structured. And since property tax revenues are so important to local governments, we would urge the committee to support the bill and pass SB 442 as it is in front of you. And we want to thank the Office of Energy for bringing this forward, and also the committee for the opportunity to provide testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Justin Harrison, representing Clark County. First, would just like to thank Director Bobson and Ms. Yoakum from the Governor's Office of Energy for the excellent presentation. We are here today in support of the bill, and would echo the comments of Ms. Stapleton as for counties. These tax abatements do have great effect on the local budget, and we do see this bill as a positive step forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next person in support in the room.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. My name is Emily Walsh, EMILYWALSH, and I'm here today on behalf of the Nevada Conservation League. The League was proud to support the original legislation to create this program in 2005. The program resulted in higher energy efficiency and sustainability standards in many large projects in Nevada, and we were really proud to work with this body to adjust these abatements in the 2007 session. However, now as you've heard, it's clear that the program has outlived its usefulness. The clear path forward is to adopt higher energy conservation standards that take advantage of all cost-effective energy efficiency measures and start to move toward net zero buildings. In the near future, we would like to see local governments move forward with adopting the most recent version of the International Energy Conservation Code and adding provisions to make buildings electrification ready, including charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. We must reduce our carbon pollution from buildings if we're to meet our state's climate goals, and we look forward to working with this body, the Office of Energy, and our local governments to make this happen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room? Seeing none and seeing no one on Zoom, we'll go to the phones, please.
If you would like to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 442, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you'd like to provide testimony in support to Senate Bill 442, please press star 9 now. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we do not have any callers at this time wishing to provide support testimony.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in opposition in the room? Okay, seeing none and seeing none on the Zoom, we'll go to the phones, please, for opposition.
If you would like to provide testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 442, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. If you would like to provide testimony in opposition to Senate Bill 442, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we do not have any callers at this time wishing to provide opposition testimony.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral in the room? Seeing none and seeing none on Zoom, we'll go to the phones, please.
If you would like to provide neutral testimony on Senate Bill 442, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide neutral testimony on Senate Bill 442, please press star 9 now. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we do not have any callers at this time wishing to provide neutral testimony.
Thank you. Director and Program Manager, do you want to make any closing remarks? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. David Bobzien for the record. Thank you for the opportunity this afternoon. Thank you for the hearing. Wish everyone well. If you have any questions, please reach out to us.
Thank you. With that, I will close the hearing on SB 442 and open the hearing on SCR 11, which creates a joint special committee to conduct a study concerning innovation zones. Please go ahead when you're ready, Mr. Dillis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Good afternoon, Chairwoman and committee members. For the record, my name is Scott Gillis. I'm the Senior Advisor to Governor Sisolak. I'm here today to present Senate Concurrent Resolution 11. SCR 11 would ultimately create a joint special committee of the legislature for the purpose of conducting hearings and a full analysis of the idea presented by the governor in his State of the State speech, that idea to create innovation zones in Nevada. The purpose and intent of the governor's proposal is to diversify Nevada's economy and enhance our ability to attract new and innovative technology companies to the state. The proposal would create a broad structure by which, the original innovation zone proposal would create a broad structure by which applicants engaged in the development of these technologies could apply to create an innovation zone after meeting strict standards, requirements laid out by statute, including a significant investment commitment. No tax incentives, abatements, or public investment would be part of this proposal as it's currently drafted. The projections compiled for one project that would apply for an innovation zone are substantial. The extent of the economic output, development output, wages, and jobs would equate to a significant positive economic impact for the entire state and the creation of an entirely new industry. Based on these projections and the economic development potential for Nevada, the governor believed and still believes this is an idea worth pursuing. But the reality is this, there are limitations that come with a biennial 120-day session, never mind one taking place during a historic pandemic. That has required state officials and legislators to direct their energy toward the impact of COVID and the critical response needed throughout this session. And it became clear in recent weeks that a proposal of this magnitude was not going to fit into this particular session. The governor believes this idea warrants and deserves a proper vetting, proper analysis, and time to work through what is admittedly a number of issues and complex pieces. We understand simply could not happen in the last month of the session, and that ultimately felt that wouldn't be good for anyone involved. After working with leadership on the concept of, after working with legislative leadership on the concept of the Innovation Zone proposal, the governor felt the best path forward to vet the idea and in a valuable way was to establish an interim joint special committee, which is what SCR 11 would ultimately do. Like the proposal for Innovation Zones itself, the method of creating this committee is also unique in its approach. Along with establishing the committee to meet in the interim, the resolution does the following. In terms of membership, SCR 11 provides for the appointment of at least 6 members to the committee, 2 members of the Senate and 2 of the Assembly, appointed by the Majority Leader and the Speaker respectively, and 1 member from the Assembly and 1 member from the Senate appointed by the Minority Leaders. In terms of process, the committee would elect, pretty straightforward, the committee would elect its own chairs and would be required to meet at least once a month before the end of the calendar year. In terms of topics that the committee would discuss, ultimately, what we've asked and we're looking to do is the governor's BDR, which was submitted early in the session, as we've worked with LCB on finalizing that language. The hope is, and I've talked to Mr. Fernley about this, and he said this was doable, to have at least a final product by the end of session for the committee then to look at and treat as an actual bill that would go through that joint special committee. So that piece of proposed legislation is not finalized yet, but again, the idea is that we'd have a place to start at least for those discussions going forward. The committee would not, as laid out in the resolution, the committee would not be limited on the issues it would like to discuss or could discuss. But the resolution itself does refer to a few specific topics of economic benefit and impact that the committee must look at, and I'll go through those quickly. Things you'd probably expect to be in there: economic development, job creation, workforce development, affordable housing, water, natural resources and the environment, impact on surrounding counties as well as any county where an innovation zone would be located, and impact on other forms of local government in the surrounding areas. And importantly, and probably most importantly, state and local revenues and distribution of taxes. And again, any other topics related to the proposal that the committee members feel is appropriate to analyze and review and vet, they'd be allowed to do that. And again, the opportunity to do this all not, under the same time constraints created by the last few weeks, let alone days of a regular legislative session. In terms of stakeholders, the committee is directed to solicit the input of all interested stakeholders, and that is ultimately our intention. But the bill specifically calls out local governments, tribal governments, environmental groups, labor organizations, economic development authorities, water authorities, and technology industries. In terms of the timeline, the committee will operate on an admittedly strict timeline to complete its review and submit its recommendations regarding the creation of the innovation zones in Nevada by the end of this calendar year, December 31st, to the extent practicable. So that language is in the resolution. Unfortunately, the unprecedented impacts of COVID-19 on Nevada have left this legislature with many other critical issues to deliberate in the last 113 days or whatever we've been here for. The proposed measure before you today, we believe is a responsible solution to that challenge. Ultimately, trying to evaluate an unprecedented economic development measure in a short amount of time, let alone, again, the last couple of weeks of this session, was truly not going to be practical. We know innovation zones are unique. They're not entirely unprecedented. Nevada could be the next example of the technological and economic success, and the governor is confident that Nevada should take the opportunity now to look at what may or may not be possible. The creation of the committee will provide legislators and stakeholders this opportunity to hold and participate in hearings and fully evaluate the proposal, which we believe holds a tremendous potential for the state of Nevada. In the end, ultimately, the governor wants the stakeholders, the public, and of course, this legislative body to be enthusiastic about the opportunity and not skeptical, about a fast-tracked bill in the final weeks of the session. Nevadans deserve that, and the governor believes this joint committee is the right solution to explore that opportunity. I urge your support for this process and that will allow for a full and deliberate review of the proposal and its potential impacts to our state. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the Majority Leader and the Speaker for their support in bringing this resolution, and of course, thank you to the committee for hearing the SCR 11 today. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Committee, do we have any questions? Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, and thank you for bringing the bill forward, Mr. Scott. Few questions, sorry. The first question has to do actually with the date that the study has to be done by, December 31st, 2021. That only gives us 7 months, and although there is a bill, it does feel a little bit quick. So was there reasoning behind having it done by the end of this calendar year as opposed to by the end of a fiscal year or even in preparation for the following session?
Thank you. Through the chair to the Assemblywoman. Yeah, the reason for it is we wanted to have it addressed sooner rather than later. In the event, one of the recommendations, which is actually laid out in the resolution as an opportunity, as an option for a recommendation, would be to bring this to a recommendation to have this brought forth in a special session to have it addressed. So that was the primary driver for the timeline. Admittedly, it is fast. I think we all know that there'll be some work done between now and then. I won't opine on LCB's staff's ability and resources. We came to this date after discussions with leadership.
Thank you. Can I have another question, Mr. Chair? Is that okay? Oh, thank you. My other question has to do actually with the items that are listed, and I realized, and you had mentioned that this is just the section, not sections, I guess it's on page 2, lines 13 through 20, where you list out those 8 items. Has there been any discussion at all, or is there also time to be able to discuss the infrastructures, such as the roads, the bridges, the sewers, and how that would also have an impact on the counties around them? Or is that, believe that would actually be under number 7 listed? Trying to figure out if that needs to be specified at all.
Thank you. Through the chair, Scott Gills for the record. Sorry, I'm rusty at this. Scott Gills for the record, through the chair to the Assemblywoman. At least it's our intent that that list in that particular section is not an exhaustive list, and those are the exact things we would want to have discussed and vetted. And I do believe, impact on county and other forms of local government would cover those types of infrastructure and road issues.
Thank you. And last question, I promise, if I may. I really appreciate the fact that there is the discussion around this, but I think a biggie is the checks and balances. And so during this discussion, has there been any, or will there be, do you envision also a possibility of, okay, so this is brought forward, it's going great, and then it all of a sudden is not going well. Has there been any sort of, or do you believe there should be discussion as well if the study mitigates changes and how that will impact the rest of the county? Am I making myself clear kind of what I'm asking? Like how should the county be impacted as well? Like if it doesn't go out as well as it should? Does that make sense what I'm asking? Hoping.
I think so. Scott Gills for the record, through the chair to you, Assemblywoman. Yeah, I mean, if I understand your question, that is exactly what one of the many pieces that needs to be discussed and worked through with that legislation is to figure out ultimately if this process has started with an application to go it and the financial commitments are made and it gets down the line and whatever happens with economic development projects, just like any other major master plan community in the state, to make sure that those protections for whether it be residents or business owners or whoever it may be who live in this particular innovation zone, which is, will be a quasi-governmental, that they're ultimately protected in that event, just like any other major development.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chair.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Chair. So I am looking at, and I believe it should probably be on Nellis, I know it was emailed to us, sort of the one-page summary that you sent us. And I took the liberty to go ahead and look per your last paragraph at the Joint Special Committee from the 59th session, which was 1977, and recognize some of those names. Now, every member, it was 6 members of the Senate and 6 members of the Assembly. You did make reference to the responsibilities of the committee and then working with interested stakeholders. Is it the idea that, I know I've served on interim committees in the past that have had members of the public, not just of this body, serving on that as well. And I was just sort of wondering, is it, so at each meeting, is the idea that we would have members of this legislative body on this committee and then create the agenda to bring the stakeholders, or would there be, and if that is, you're nodding your head, so I'm guessing that that's what you're saying. And then I guess I'm trying to understand when we're saying that we're bringing the stakeholders, I get a little concerned that the people who would be invited might not really have the voice that we're kind of hoping that they would have. Does that make sense? We're bringing the stakeholders, but really the committee is the one that's setting the agenda. And so I just want to make sure that during the study that the voices of folks are very, very much heard, and how would we sort of figure that, what would that look like? If that makes sense.
Scott Gillis, for the record, through the chair to the Assemblywoman. That does make sense, and I think you've actually kind of hit on something that, at least I think if this bill were to pass, the executive branch would need to be partly responsible through GOED and the governor's office and those involved, is to ensure that those stakeholders who are listed in here, as well as any other who reach out and express concern or support for the project, that they would be looped in to make sure that they're a part of the conversation. I know in the last House, when we had this hearing, there was discussion of public workshops and stakeholder workshops outside of the actual specific legislative process, which will be a legislative committee run just like this committee with a bill to work off of. I think we would totally be in support of that. Again, it's obviously going to defer to this body and how they would want to run the joint special committee. But if there is the need and desire, and it's valuable to have some sort of public workshop, stakeholder engagement outside of a hearing environment, I think we'd be all for that, and quite frankly, the executive branch can assist and help with that.
And before we move on to the next question, I want to make sure I understood. So are you saying the stakeholders would be voting members or not voting members? I want to make sure we're really clear on that.
Thank you, Chair. Scott Gills for the record. I apologize if I confused that issue. The way this is drafted now, I don't see that the stakeholders would be voting members. You'd have at least 6 members of the Joint Committee who would ultimately be voting on, the way I understand it, a recommendation that says we don't think any further action is needed. We should bring this back and submit a BDR for the 2023 session, which this resolution would allow, gives them a BDR, or a recommendation to the governor's office that this makes sense to be brought back for during a special session. But in terms of how that decision is made, the way I read it is it would be the 6 or more legislative committee body who would be making that final vote and determination on whether or not to, what recommendation to bring forward. So long-winded answer to answer your question, I don't think this sets up a process by which stakeholders would be voting members on the committee.
Thank you. Assemblyman O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. And Mr. Gills, I'm not sure if you can answer this, or if I was looking to see if we had legal with us. But building on the prior questioning, in the next several months, we have most likely 2 special sessions at least facing us. One of them being, could be very protracted in redistricting. So when you look at those discussions that your legislature is going to be involved in, then you look at the timeline that you hear, and even you were talking, or we've been talking about having work groups or hearing sessions out in the communities. What would happen if we didn't finish by December 31st? Is there a legal ramification to that, or, and that's why I say I'm not sure you can answer it, but I hope you and staff can understand where I'm sort of going forward, considering all that's in front of us, our scheduling as we have now, and what we want to do, because I may be doing an epistle to you. This is a serious situation or a serious committee that we're trying to develop here on a very involved, it's just not a simple action. Do you want to build this or do you not want to build this? I mean, when you just look at what you've listed, who's going to be involved, what's some of the areas, and I think that will expand. That's my question is there the time with this timeline given? To me, I think it's too short personally. That would be my stumbling block to really supporting the bill. Not the design of the bill, but if it has to be done and done half-heartedly then just to meet a deadline, I think you're going to get a poor presentation. Would you, I've got to make a question out of it, would you agree with that? Or like to comment? How's that question? Thank you.
Scott Gills for the record, through the chair to you, Assemblyman. Yeah, it is complex. I'm not trying to sugarcoat that at all, and that is exactly why one of the governor's 5 BDRs that was submitted in early February, why we've chosen not to try and press that piece of legislation into a really tight timeline during this 120-day session. So that the reason you're flagging is the exact reason why we've talked to leadership and asked them to bring this measure to have this discussed and dissected outside of this 120-day session. Again, admittedly, it is a fast timeline. There will be a lot going on between now and then. We came to the state following discussions with leadership, and again, I want to opine on LCB's resources. That's not my job, but this is what we were told would work and be sufficient in the conversations we had with leadership. So, don't know if I have anything else to add to that. In terms of legal ramifications for not having a report submitted to the governor and back to this body by December 31st, I don't believe there are any in the bill. I mean, this is a concurrent resolution that would come out of this body with this body's approval. But there is language in there that speaks to the extent practicable by December 31st. So I would say it's not a black and white deadline, but the bill suggests a goal of December 31st.
And I appreciate that. I just don't see it as a suggestion. I see it as a drop-dead date. And that's that's probably my biggest concern, considering the importance of this bill, and we want to do it right.
Agreed.
That's what I would like for you. So, Chair, I don't know if there's a way, am I asking an impossible question there for the determination on that, or is there, do you have any, legal's not here, so maybe we can delay for legal? Would that be appropriate?
Right, we can certainly ask legal, but it is this committee's purview to vet the bill and determine if we want amendments, if we want to follow the language as it is. But I think the simple language, if you read the language, it does say if possible. So I think it would be up to the committee that is appointed, should this pass, to determine what's possible. Practicable, I think, is the word that's used.
So thank you, Mr. Gills. Thank you, Chair, for my time.
Assemblyman Hafen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could have 2 questions. One, Mr. Gillis, first of all, it's great to see you today. I appreciate you presenting, and I'll throw you a softball to follow up on Assemblyman O'Neill's question. Theoretically speaking, the recommendation of the study could be to continue to study this further after the December 31st, 2021, correct?
Scott Gillis for the record, I'm just reading it real quick to make sure.
And I thought I was helping you.
Thank you, Scott Gillis for the record through the chair to the Assemblyman. As a former lawyer in my previous life, I wanted to make sure I was reading it correctly. I believe the way it reads that could be the recommendation. I think the vehicle for doing that is not necessarily laid out in here explicitly, but it's a legislative committee, so.
And thank you for that. My other question is kind of along the same lines as all of the other members has mentioned, is the time frame. We're knock on wood, hopefully coming out of a once-in-a-decade pandemic, and we've been discussing this now for almost 5 months. And I know that there's a possibility for this to go into a special session. And I just, with all the conversations and all the studying, why have the distinction between regular session or possibly a special session rather than fully vetting it out in the next regular session?
Scott Gillis for the record through the chair to the Assemblyman. Quite simply, options for the committee. If the committee has the opportunity to vet these issues and hear from stakeholders and ultimately determines it is what we believe it to be, an economic development opportunity for the state of Nevada, we wouldn't want to limit them to not bringing it sooner than February of 2023.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the multiple questions.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. I do have a couple of questions, but I know that this is about innovation zones, not any one particular, the idea of having multiple zones, I guess, around the state. But I'm looking at a map, I guess, of the one that is being reviewed or thought about right now that was part of an exhibit, and it's brought up a couple of questions that I had never seen, that I didn't think about before. Because it was my understanding that an innovation zone would be like this one contiguous area, and what I'm looking at is there's sort of islands that in this sort of map might not be part of that zone if this was to pass. So when this study goes on, will the members of the study be looking at whether or not an innovation zone would be able to take any of that property in eminent domain or through annexation, or like expansions, or whether or not it has to be contiguous without having islands? I guess I'm just sort of worried about how big this gets, if it's like piece here, piece here, piece here, and then connected later on. So would that be part of the study?
Scott Gillis for the record through the chair to the Assemblywoman. Absolutely. I think any piece of how an innovation zone can be created, how it can do things with land that is privately owned, will be discussed, through that substantive process of the Joint Special Committee. I'm not aware of any proposal to date, and again, we don't have a bill yet, but I'm not aware of any proposal to date that would allow for the things you just described. But if those were concerns that the committee had that they didn't think were appropriate for an ultimate piece of legislation on creating innovation zones, and that committee would have that right to make that decision and put that in, and ultimately into a bill for the 2023 session as is outlined in the resolution.
Thank you. May I ask another question, Chair? And then my other question is looking at this as potentially being multiple zones, not just one. And I know that the study would be whether or not an innovation zone should be created. But if they were, and these were continuous, would the county that these zones may possibly be in be included in all of these areas, so that you're considering whether or not, okay, is this workable within the county as it is? Does it need to be in an innovation zone? Will that sort of setup then be carried over whenever there is another innovation zone applied for? Will that sort of bifurcation of understanding whether or not it can be done within the existing county, or does it need to be an innovation zone? Would that be done each time, or is that only this one overlay?
Scott Gillis for the record through the chair to the Assemblywoman. I think that's a great question. It's a question I don't have an answer to right now because, again, we don't have a final piece of legislation we're working off of. But that is exactly the conversation we want to have during the Joint Special Committee, is to vet a concern like that for a committee member and make sure that however it's established, the process for a company to apply for an innovation zone, if there's parameters the legislative body wants to put on that, that'll be their want.
Thank you very much.
I have some questions in the topics section. So number 4, empowerment centers, what's that referring to?
Scott Gillis for the record. The empowerment centers, my understanding of empowerment centers would refer to community centers for seniors or students. It's kind of an all-encompassing term. I don't know that there's any specific parameters on that term in our statutory, in NRS. So I think that could be defined as needed throughout those discussions during the Joint Special Committee. But my understanding would be empowerment centers would be senior or student type community centers.
Okay, and then staying in the topics section, under the counties and other forms of local government, is that including judicial issues that can arise if an innovation zone were allowed to proceed? Would court issues and judicial issues fall under that?
Scott Gillis for the record, thank you. I believe so. That list of topics there, it really it charges the special committee with looking at the benefits and the impacts of innovation zones on the following things, those being counties and other forms of local government. So, yeah, I think it's counties, cities, GIDs, and any other type of quasi-governmental agency, courts within that district. All those would the impact and benefits would be of any of those organizations or governments, would be looked at, should be looked at.
Okay, thank you. And with that also, I know that the tribal governments are mentioned in a few different places, but not specifically in that list. So I just want to make sure that the intent is for them to be included there.
Scott Gillis for the record, absolutely.
Okay, and then under, and you and I discussed this, and I don't know if you had a chance to get an answer on the reference to global interests, which is in a couple places in the bill. Can you tell me what is global interests?
Scott Gillis for the record. I didn't do a great job since this morning of tracking down that answer. Chairwoman, again, as I mentioned earlier, I had not drafting the bill. I'm not sure what the exact intention behind it is. My belief is it's referring to other businesses, international businesses that could be potentially recruited to an innovation zone. But I will track that down.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned improvement districts, and I didn't do a good job in my notes of writing down what I was thinking about, but that I understand that area is under the TRI General Improvement District, and so will they be specifically a part of this, or if the committee were to exclude them, would they be excluded? Like, how is that all working?
Sure, great questions. Scott Gillis for the record. I expect and I hope that General Improvement District is heavily involved in these discussions.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess I just want to echo the concerns that have been mentioned by some people on the committee about the timeline. When I think about the water law issues alone, I think getting people up to speed on that could possibly take 6 meetings over 6 months, but with that, I will move on and have the Vice Chair ask her questions.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I appreciate that. So I just wanted to start off really basic, which is, how did we get to now? We've got the study in front of us, and I think you've given us a really good explanation of why we have a study, but I mean, the issues that brought us to the point to say that we have an industry with a specific need, that seems to not be able to reach that need in any other way than to get some legislative reprieve. And so I guess as much as comfortable, how did we get to now?
Scott Gillis, through the chair to the vice chair. I mean, I think we've gotten to where we are now looking at potential opportunity. Conversations that our office had, related to a potential project that would need this type of framework to work, based on projections we saw in terms of jobs and indirect output, direct output, wages, potential taxation and revenue, it was worth pursuing. I mean, that's ultimately what brought us to the point of the governor speaking about it in the State of the State and working on a bill draft that we submitted to LCB, and ultimately, knowing that, there was never a version of the world where the first bill that we submitted was going to be the final version, because this is a complex topic. So we haven't had that opportunity, and we didn't think it made sense to try and push that opportunity through this session. So.
Okay. I was actually thinking of something different. I think of how we got to now is the fact that everything that you're enumerating, kind of 1 through 8 in the document of things that you want the special committee to consider are, I look at it and I kind of see it as a conversation that is long overdue when you look at that list, which is, how do we organize and manage ourselves? How do we have some planning around how we grow? And how do we make sure all needs are being met as we grow? And I think that it's a conversation that has been missing from this area of the state, that kind of comprehensive conversation, both retroactive and forward-looking, to say we have impacts that come when we do these kinds of projects. And what we ought to do is we ought to study those impacts before we move forward. And so we have kind of an eyes wide open public policy approach. And that's the piece of this that I'm extremely interested in. My experience has been without a whole conversation about how you plan and how you grow and how you bring in a business, is that you end up with a bunch of one-off conversations. So I'll take the example of around the natural resources and environment, and the regional water supplies. Without comprehensive planning, we are going to have 100 little water fights talking about what happens in a region where water is ultimately so scarce. Or we kind of end up with policies that get punted to the legislature very quickly. In the past administration, I remember being called very swiftly to an emergency IFC meeting so we could contemplate the bonding of the water line to bring the effluent from the Reno Sparks area, from Sparks out into the Trick area. And then a lot of good conversations that we should have had about water management, who's paying for that water, who's not paying for that water, how that water's coming in, and who's bonding, and all of those conversations are happening really hot and quick in an afternoon committee. And then we're just hoping that everything kind of plays out well, right? When we talk about affordable housing, if we talk about how we grow and how we want to grow, I think we all feel like we're being negligent if we don't talk about affordable housing. And so to me, the pieces of this I really like is their conversations about how we grow in a way that's right. What I would imagine is that having those conversations to this point have been not as productive as possible, because if so, then we have everything in statute to go forward. But I think that more of a holistic conversation makes more sense. My experience with a lot of projects where we say that we want to focus on economic development is it's economic development in a vacuum without consideration for these other things. It's economic development saying as long as we're growing and bringing a company in, then we've landed the plane and mission solved, without the conversation about infrastructure surrounding that development. And that's how I feel like we got to now, is because those conversations have been missing. And I like this as a recognition that it's time to sit down and think about how things play out before we as legislators push a button and then just watch it play out and realize, oh my gosh, we don't have housing out there. Oh my gosh, we've built a commuter county. And so when we talk about impacts, I I think this conversation's long overdue.
If I may, Scott Gills for the record, through the chair to the vice chair, I agree 100%. I misunderstood your question, and I think those are valuable questions to have. I think a proposal of this magnitude that, doesn't include tax abatements and incentives, but does include a pretty significant change in policy and the creation of what is a new type of local government or an expanded GID in the economic development sense does necessitate these conversations if it's going to be done right. This isn't a small endeavor, so it's worthy of those conversations. And again, that's why we're thankful, hopefully thankful, that this body allows us to have those conversations over a long period of time, as opposed to, the end of this session.
And I'll follow up. I know that it can feel like, and I've heard members express concern that, one meeting a month and getting to December seems like a short time frame, but it is a longer time frame than we are in session, although it's fewer meetings. But my hope would be is that if there were a committee like this, that it would be productive with the time. I know there's some conversations about workshops and such, and I understand that. I would say, though, that you want all conversations to be had on the legislative record, because that's where the minutes are kept and that's where the official minutes are kept. Workshops, members, they're not staffed and minutes aren't kept. Even if we just devolved this committee into a workshop where, the staff don't keep minutes and you don't have an accurate record of that other than what someone happens to write down on a piece of paper. So I think the more you keep this within that traditional committee system, the better, because that's where the resources are. And having worked on some committees like this before, you do want the resources of the legislature. You want access to your legal. You want access to your policy drafters. All those wonderful things that insulate legislators to help us make good decisions, I think are important.
Scott Gills for the record. Thank you, Vice Chair. I tend to agree with you. The concept of the public workshops was brought up in the other House, and it's my opinion of the resolution that it wouldn't preclude that. But ultimately, it will be this body and the committee's decision on how to run those committees and the length of the meetings, the frequency, et cetera. Above and beyond, at least one per month is laid out in the resolution. But I tend to agree with you. Again, I'll make a pitch that the executive branch and the Governor's Office of Economic Development is here to assist and be a resource for these committee meetings to the extent this body wants us to. And I'll leave it at that.
A supplement, Hafen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Majority Leader and the Chairwoman's line of questions actually got me looking at this a little bit deeper, and I know that I believe it's the third whereas talks about all of the stakeholders, and it mentioned, the Majority Leader mentioned the water concerns. Obviously, for the full disclosure, I run a private water company, and so I do see that could be a big component of this. I noticed, though, that we're listing water authorities, and if I'm not mistaken, there's only 2 water authorities in the state. And so I just would like to make sure that we're not limiting it to that, because I believe most of the smaller counties have water districts, kind of a smaller scale of the water authorities. And so I just like to have it on the record that they will still have the ability to have a seat at the table, as these innovation zones potentially could be anywhere throughout the entire state.
Scott Gills for the record, through the chair to the Assemblyman. Again, having not drafted the bill, I can't speak to the actual intention of the bill language, but that is our intention, at least from the Governor's office, that any impacted water authority or water company who needs to have a say in these discussions would absolutely have a say in these discussions.
Just for clarification, I wasn't referencing water companies. I was trying to reference the water districts.
Excuse me, water districts.
Specifically, Lincoln Water District, and Nye County has a water district as well. So I just wanted to make sure it was on the record for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I misspoke. Water districts is what I meant to say.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to any support support in the room? Okay, seeing none in the room or on Zoom, we will move to support on the phones, please.
If you would like to provide testimony in support to Senate Concurrent Resolution 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide testimony in support of Senate Concurrent Resolution 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 503, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hello, my name is Chris Bosse. That's Bosse for the record. I'm here today on behalf of Renown Health to stand in support of SCR 11. We believe a study to evaluate innovation zones and their potential impact on economic and workforce development is of significant importance to Nevada as we look at ways to grow the Nevada economy. We urge your support of SCR 11 and thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you. Next person in support, please.
Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 244, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hi, Patrick Boileau with the Operating Engineers Local 3, PATRICKBOILEAU. The Operating Engineers Local 3 and the Nevada Building Trades stand strongly in support of this bill. We think that a holistic look at development, including workforce development, is exactly what Nevada needs, and we urge you to pass this bill along. Thank you very much.
Next person in support, please.
Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 681, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
My name is Vince Saavedra. That's V-I-N-C-E, Saavedra, S-A-A-V-E-D-R-A, representing iron workers in the state of Nevada. We just want to let you know we're in support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person in support, please.
One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 292, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Good afternoon, Rob Benner, R-O-B-B-E-N-N-E-R with Northern Nevada Building Trades. Project this size will benefit the entire state, not just Northern Nevada, and will keep our workforce working in the event of another downturn. We believe this project is worth your study and consideration and urge you to support SCR 11. Thank you.
Next person in support, please.
If you have recently joined the call and would like to provide testimony in support to Senate Concurrent Resolution 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the line is open and working. However, there are no more callers wishing to provide support testimony at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, we're in support. Are you in support? Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, Madam Chair. I was in another committee that just finished up. Just want to testify in support of this bill on behalf of the Operating Engineers Local 12 and Local 3. We see this as a great opportunity for the state of Nevada. We see it as a job opportunity for everyone in Northern Nevada, certainly, and to benefit the state as a whole. So we're in support. Thank you.
And for the record, your name, Mr. Thompson?
I'm sorry, Danny Thompson. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no one else in support, we will go to opposition. Let's start with opposition in the room.
For the record, my name is Annette Magnus, and I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. We rise in strong opposition to SCR 11 and this flawed, dangerous innovation zone proposal, even as a study. At a time when our state is facing an affordable housing crisis, lack of access to adequate affordable health care, and a poorly funded public education system, it is grievously inappropriate to spend time studying a proposal to give a billionaire CEO an unproven company their own autonomous government. We've been here before. I've seen this my entire life in this state. We went through this with the Raiders Stadium, where proponents assured us that if you just build it, they will come, and that it wouldn't cost the Nevada taxpayers very much at all. That clearly didn't last as we told you all it wouldn't. We went through it with Faraday Futures, who promised investments and jobs. That clearly collapsed quickly, and now Henderson is meeting with the Oakland Athletics this week to possibly spend even more tax dollars on yet another stadium. I have to ask, when are we going to learn? We already know this blockchain quasi-county would require stealing water from local tribal communities who were not consulted before blockchain started buying up the rights. It also raises serious concerns about the return of company towns, which is exactly what this is, regardless of how you try to dress it up. While this resolution only requires the study of this proposal, we remain extremely concerned that the proper input will not be sought, nor that input will be needed in future, whatever the final report concludes. This legislature and this committee has the ability to reject this ridiculous concept here and now and focus on other priorities that would benefit struggling Nevadans. My dad has always taught me that if something is too good to be true, it usually is. We should not be wasting time or money studying this. We should be talking about education revenue, affordable housing, or healthcare, actual priorities to real Nevadans. Please vote no on SCR 11 and have a real conversation about raising revenue in a sustainable long-term way and supporting Nevadans who are suffering, like AGR 1, instead of another handout to a corporation that will fail like all the previous ones have. By the way, the Raiders Stadium just took out another payment from the county this week. Thank you.
Mr. Daly, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. First, just a quick word about public schools. And I know that we have a career teacher and a chair of the Education Committee in the room. We know that schools are here to educate our kids. In communities, schools oftentimes, if not most of the time, serve a unique function as centers in communities, places where families convene. In fact, public education comes out of really the goals of democratic society from the late 1800s to prepare people to become responsible citizens, to improve social conditions, promote cultural unity, and the like. Public schools really are a huge part of the common good in this country. And so I say that in reference to SCR 11 in opposition, largely because of the failure of this resolution to contemplate, consider, highlight the role of public education or public schools in the creation of a new city or a new county or whatever you want to call innovation zones. Certainly, I would say if you do decide to move forward with the discussion, we would implore you, at the very least, to amend this resolution to make sure that public schools, public education are forefront in any contemplation of creating a new place that has any semblance of community in the state of Nevada. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in opposition in the room and none on Zoom, we'll go to the phones, please.
If you would like to provide opposition testimony for Senate Concurrent Resolution 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide testimony in opposition to SCR 11, please press star 9 now. Chair, the line is open and working. However, we do not have any callers at this time wishing to provide opposition testimony.
Thank you. With that, we will move to neutral in the room.
Good afternoon again, Chair Cohen, members of the committee, Dagny Stapleton, Executive Director of NACO, the Nevada Association of Counties. We are neutral on STR 11 and appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony today. When the idea of innovation zones was introduced, the proponents did reach out and presented their concept and preliminary language to counties. At that time, county representatives made clear that we had a handful of concerns about innovation zones. In March, our members voted unanimously to oppose the concept as it had been presented to counties. That vote included representatives from 16 of Nevada's counties, both urban and rural. Concerns included fiscal impact, impacts to county services, and preserving the integrity of county governance. We want to thank the Governor's Office for the proposed study to look at and analyze the critical issues connected to the concept of innovation zones prior to any innovation zone legislation being introduced. We also appreciate the language in the resolution recognizing the important role that counties would play in the study, and appreciate the questions of the committee ensuring that stakeholders would really have a voice in that process, as we are one of the very important stakeholders, we believe, in this study. We look forward to participating in the study and providing any and all information that would be helpful. Again, we thank the sponsors and the committee for the opportunity to provide testimony.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Mary Walker, representing Carson, Douglas, Lyon, and Story counties. We rise neutral on SCR 11, the study of innovation zones. We would like to thank the governor and the legislature on the even-handedness of the study. We appreciate the study would include impacts to local revenue and taxes, not just state revenues. Because while the proponents have stated that there's no impact on state revenue or abatements, there is substantial impact on local revenues and local taxes. We also appreciate the study will include the impacts to counties. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Please go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask a little bit more to make sure that we had it clear for the record. Ms. Walker, you mentioned the local impact and impact to local jurisdiction, local taxes. I'm assuming you mean lost revenue, but I don't want to misinterpret. Is that what you mean?
For the record, Mary Walker, yes, there's a couple of ways that this can impact local revenues. First off, in the Mr. Burns Blockchain LLC proposal, it would take approximately 40% of Story County's land away from them into another, basically, county. That takes away the future growth of the community. The other thing that happens is in Section 35 of the Mr. Burns Blockchain LLC proposal, is it states that if the blockchain company is building their city and they're paying sales tax and local sales tax, that is part of the consolidated tax, Section 35 says the following year, the executive director of the Department of Taxation will reimburse all of those local taxes back to, it says the innovation zones, but because it's going to be operated by two members of the blockchain group, then it's the majority of the members would get the benefit of those dollars back. In addition, there's another concern, and this has been discussed, and that is the concern that, and we can provide a map to you, Madam Vice Chair. If you look at the map of the area, the blockchain land is about 57,000 acres, and it does create islands of the Google, for example. Google is totally an island with the blockchain land all around it. In Tesla, it looks like it's about maybe 3/4 of the land is surrounding Tesla is the Mr. Burns Blockchain LLC property. So the concern is this proposal going to allow annexation of Tesla, Google, Switch to this new county? And if it is, then basically what would happen is Tesla right now has couple of different abatements. One's on property tax. It's for 10 years, and it comes up and goes away in about 3 or so years from now. The sales tax abatement was a 20-year abatement. That's 13 years from now. It will go away. So what will happen is the new county would receive all of the tax revenues from Tesla, Google, Switch, and it would go to this new jurisdiction. That is a tremendous impact of local taxes to the county where this proposal is supposed to be made. So if that happens and all of that, those Tesla taxes goes to this new jurisdiction, this new county, they would be able to use it for the development costs, as an example, to put in sewer, water, roads that a developer would normally have to do. So they're taking, in my mind, Story County taxpayers, local taxpayers' dollars, and they're going to be giving it to a developer to pay for his developer costs. So there's some tremendous effects.
Okay. I had a question, and maybe tax staff, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You mentioned the abatements from Tesla, the property tax piece, and then the sales tax piece, and they do have staggering timelines when they end. One is ending up in a couple of years, but then I believe I think that's the property tax, but then the sales tax has an additional extension on that. Is
Yes.
that right? Tax staff, am I recalling?
Madam Chair, this is Russell again with Fiscal Analysis Division. Yeah, from memory here, the property tax abatements for Tesla were 10 years. And so as Ms. Walker stated, I believe it's 2024 thereabouts, that then the property tax abatements will be expiring and then those taxes will begin being paid. Being paid and distributed according to the property tax distribution provisions. And from memory, the sales tax abatements, I believe, are 20 years.
That's right.
And so then there will be another 20 years past that 2024 period that the sales tax abatements will still be in place.
Perfect. And I'm glad you mentioned those, because when we talk about Tesla and we talk about all those ones, those are projects that came to be specifically through the Governor's Office of Economic Development. So the state kind of making that investment and saying, we are going to forego the collection of these taxes and the state general fund being able to earn these revenues, knowing that in 2024 down the line, revenues will be coming in. For fun, and well, actually the whole committee, we heard about the demographer's report as it relates to taxes and all that kind of stuff. And when you look through there, and it looks through the projections of growth for Story County, there's not much growth in population. It looks to stay about the same. So in about 2024, when those property taxes end, it looks like the population is going to still be about 8,500 people, 9,000 people. Is that right? That's the official demographer report.
I would have to defer that to Story County. We do have Austin Osborne here.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Austin Osborne, Story County Manager. Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. To answer your question on that, and I do have some testimony I'm going to give in the neutral position when my turn comes up, and I did plan on speaking about this a bit. So the demographer's office, as he suggests, is suggesting, a pretty much a flat plane of growth. What our master plan supports in Story County, which is developer driven, and what we've written our new zoning and everything for, is for that area where the proponents of this bill are proposing to build, is a major residential community. the Board of Story County Commissioners in 2006 with unanimous approval of the Planning Commission, or let me just say approval of the Planning Commission just to make sure the record's correct, approved a major planned unit development at Painted Rock in Story County for mixed-use residential commercial community. Because of the state of the economy in 2008 and beyond, that project was not able to be built. And at this point, there would be the availability for somebody to come and build that community. In fact, I'll speak a little bit later, the dynamics of what that community would be allowed to be, and that they could develop Painted Rock to be a major residential development in Story County as being proposed. And then at that point, we would interface with the demographer's office to let them know there's a major planned unit development occurring in the county that will significantly increase that projected housing number.
I appreciate that. So is that, I guess, and thank you, because you were so kind as to earlier in a different conversation with me share that master plan that you have. But it looked like we're, correct me if I'm wrong, we're kind of 10 years out from that bump in residents or so, I guess, from the time everything gets approved, planned, built, permitted, occupied. Am I very far off? I might be far off.
Austin Osborne for the record. I'm happy to answer your question. So at this point, we can only move as fast as a developer will apply. Okay. At this time, we do not have an application for a development of that nature in that area in Story County. If an application were to come in now, today, then we would start processing that immediately. So we'd make sure the development application is complete, and we have county code that guides us through that process. And then we go through the process of subdividing, planned unit development, and the zoning that would be necessary. There is no master plan amendment needed for this. In fact, the maps of the master plan call this a transition area at Painted Rock. And that specifies in the language of the master plan that a zone or a master plan amendment to something else is not required. Immediately they go to planned unit development, they're set to go. It's basically an administrative provision, and then we would go right to subdivision and planned unit development. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So a little bit further than a no known developer right now. It's not like we're out there breaking ground right now. So we're the county's quite a bit off from having a master planned community built. So when I'm sitting here as a legislator and I'm thinking about what does affordable housing look like, or just housing general for the county look like, I should or should not be envisioning something in the next decade, and then.
If you would like, I'll answer that. Austin Osborne for the record. Thank you for the question. It's a good question. It's probably the most important question out of all of this. If they were to, we don't believe it would take 10 years to get a project like that going. We have a very short window of period of time that it takes for us to go through the Planning Commission and County Commission. We would treat a project like that with the same level of expediency that we do with the Teslas and the Switches and the big companies out there.
Yeah.
And that's why we rewrote our master plan in 2016 to specify exactly what we would like this community to look like. And to answer your question on affordable housing, one of the reasons we wanted this to be a high-density, mixed-use, kind of urban type of environment is exactly for affordable housing. We like to see multifamily, we like to see single family in a dense community core, and then as you grow from that core, it becomes significantly less dense. We're not looking for ranch houses on 1 acre parcels with horses on that property. We have places in Story County for that, and we want to protect those areas for that. This area is the workforce area for the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center. It's for the millennials, the Generation Zs, the high-tech people that want to live very close to the innovation that they're doing out at Tri-Center now. We have set it up for that. A developer that wants to come and build that project and build like this rendition they have with high-rise buildings and very small spaces to live in with open space, we love that. Our master plan loves that, and our communities liked it when we went through that community process to build our master plan. And so we believe by getting land out of the equation and creating density in that area, that it will create that availability for affordable housing.
Okay, but so at some point that's where you hope to land. But for right now, the workforce that is out there is mostly a commuter workforce. But at some point, the goal in down the road would be to be able to have housing supply out their workforce and not to be a commuter county.
Austin Osborne for the record and
Okay.
responding, absolutely. And not
And
only.
while we're waiting for that to happen, I guess we have a big change coming in 2024 when those abatements start. The abatements of those taxes, property taxes, start coming off of line. So what do things look like in once those property taxes start to come online for the county?
At this point, Austin Osborne for the record, thank you for the question. So we're looking at that at this point. There's some capital improvements that we need to look at inside Story County. There's a lot of deferred things that have occurred, in our county buildings and our senior services and facilities. There are roads in the county that are not paved, that are very primitive, that need to be addressed. And then also we're putting together a capital improvement plan for that period of time. And then also to continue looking at supporting a development that would occur in that area, whether it's Tri-Center, the Painted Rock, mixed-use
Thank you.
residential
I
area.
think, because I think we're getting close enough that folks have started to quantify that. So I guess what does that number start to look like?
We're still looking at that at this point to see what it'll look like in a 4-year period. And it's a little bit early at this point for me to give a solid answer
Okay.
with any certainty. But I'd be
Okay.
happy to follow up with you on that.
Okay.
Sorry.
The other question I wanted to ask, because I think it's important, and we were talking about it, and some folks brought it up, was the water piece. And so we've got a special assessment district that was created, right? And I think you authored the first report on the water for the, I'm going to say water company, but that's probably the bad term of art, but that GID, the General Improvement District specifically for water, and that coming in. And remind me, because I'm gonna get it wrong, but the water rights assessment evaluation in that, was it around, I want to say 200 million? It was inadvertently left out of the first report as an asset. And so when the audit was done, there was a revision to make sure that you were counting the water rights as an asset. And I want to say it was like $200 million, but I could be off.
Austin Osborne for the record. I would like to defer either to Mary Walker. We also have a representative from the Tri-General Improvement District here that also manages that.
Okay.
Is that all right, Madam Chairman? Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair, for the question. So, trying to get my own brain around this, particularly on the cost of the water. Blockchain LLC did purchase some water rights that are 15 miles and more.
No, I'm sorry. I'm talking specifically about the effluent coming from from Sparks.
Okay. All right.
The pipeline that the state bonded to bring that into Story County, okay. And so now that's an asset of Story County. And so my recollection is that there was no payment for those water rights because that was part of the deal. But when we evaluate those water rights as an asset that the GID has, it's, I want to say 215 million or 200 million.
Austin Osborne for record. We also have a representative from the Tri-GID. That pipeline really pertains to the Tri-GID.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of moving parts
and it's
to
a
that.
different piece. I think I want to, come on down. And I left the binder in my office, but I've got it so I can make sure that I get comments to staff that are more specific, but I'm sure someone has that. And I'll let you talk to that, Ms. Sadler. I think the piece that I'm holding in my head as I look at this, and once again saying that we're begging the question of impacts, we're begging the question of impacts of economic development, and we're begging the question of all of the pieces of quality of life, including resources around this that this committee might look at. That some things that I would hope would be considered and talked about are. In the same way that the state has supported and brought supports to encourage economic development for Story County as a county, then the same conversation has to be about the impacts to the state and the surrounding counties as well. And so those conversations about timelines and how things look over the next decade are going to be really important. What does Story County look like? It's going to be a county that's going to have arguably a very healthy property tax revenue starting in 2024. But also I'm going to want to know then, when does affordable housing and housing for that workforce over there happen, because otherwise the impacts are all lying on the counties to the west of it. They're lying in the counties where I live. And so important to this conversation would be what do these timeframes look like? And then also the supports that the state has given to the county. USA Parkway, I think we built out there in the Tesla special session, I believe that was $30 million, that road we put out there, and then the bonding now. I think just as we talk about impacts and things that have worked well, I think it's also time to talk about, reciprocity as well, because we have to have an idea of what this region looks like. We have to have an idea of what this area looks like. And I think we're dealing with a lot of healthy and resilient organizations in the room. I think of Story County as being healthy and resilient. You guys have built a good thing out there, and now it's kind of, you've created your own little monster here, and so we've got to have a conversation about it. We've got to have a conversation about how this all plays out and how the next decade looks regionally, innovation zones, yes or no, what's happening with Story County, how these dovetail or not, supports that the state has put out there and investments we've made in economic development by taking, foregoing revenues that we've collected as well. So to me, that's where I don't know of another place where you're going to have all those conversations other than something like this.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and through you to the Majority Leader. My name is Sarah Adler with Silver State Government Relations, and today representing the Tri-GID. And to your specific question, I am in technology-based communication with Sherry Whalen, who is the General Manager and Professional Engineer out at Tri-GID, and if she responds during this meeting today, I will share that information with the committee. Otherwise, I will follow up with you on the value of the effluent. What I can say, as long as I'm here at the table, I will quickly go ahead and give Tri-GID's neutral testimony. Ms. Whalen does reference that we also collaborate on management of an additional 4,000 acre-feet of treated effluent under contract to serve an expansive and innovative regional water reuse system that is currently under construction. So as you're aware, that is a collaborative effort with Truckee Meadows Water Authority. But to your question, we will follow up with your information. I would just like to acknowledge while I'm here at the table that the issues that Tri-GID presented in their letter, which you see as an exhibit, are related to questions that you have already asked. They are interested in the same issues that you have raised in terms of eminent domain, joint, collaborative, or overlaying government, and Tri-GID will be pleased to be a full participant. As Mr. Gillis referenced, they'll be glad to be a full participant in this process. Thank you.
Mr. Osborne, while you're up there, can you just give the committee a little bit of information about timelines for zoning and planning and building in Story County? I mean, I think Story County has a reputation for getting projects built quickly compared to other counties, and so can you just give us a little bit of that, just to make sure we do understand what that is and what it would be for a company to come in and want to do this type of project. Would there be that kind of availability for them without being an innovation zone, or just the general information about that for Story County?
Austin Osborne for the record. I'd be happy to. Chairwoman Cohen, thank you for the question. We, just off the cuff without looking at all of our zoning again and everything, but 180-day process or less is about what it takes. By the time you come through and you get your application reviewed, make sure it meets the necessary criteria, and then you go through the Planning Commission, County Commission, through your subdivision, plan unit development, et cetera. Some of that would also be dependent on how ready the developer is with their plans and what they're submitting.
And I'm sorry, I don't expect you to be an expert on other counties, but how long, do you have any idea how long like that same type of, what takes Story 180 days would take in Clark or Washoe or any of the other rural or frontier counties?
Austin Osborne for the record. Thank you for the question. I don't know exactly what goes on in other counties, but I know when we were looking at our ordinances, particularly Title 16 and 17 that deals with zoning, planning and development, and subdivisions and all the things associated with them, we did a survey of what other counties were doing, particularly Washoe and Lyon. Lyon had a new ordinance in place, and Washoe has kind of the most complex and addressed a lot of issues with the experience they've had in growth, and we were able to take those and help develop our ordinances in this. And they seem to be pretty much aligned.
Okay, thank you for that. And so feel free if you wanted to make your statement or if you're done.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to. Are there any other questions on this? And if not, I'd be happy to answer any further when I'm doing my testimony.
I don't see any others, so please go ahead. Or do you? Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Once again, Austin Osborne for the record. I'm the county manager for Story County. So Story County at this point, we are expressing a neutral position on this situation. And I just want to remind this board that 4 times the Board of Story County Commissioners voted and also directed staff and lobbyists to support elements of what's being proposed here and then to oppose others. As far as technology goes, cryptocurrency, stable coin, you name it, as long as the state of Nevada puts in the necessary structure in place to manage those resources appropriately, we're totally in support of it, no problem. As far as housing goes, I'll talk about briefly in a little bit. The Story County Commissioners, in accordance with the master plan, have supported the ideas of housing out of Painted Rock. As far as the separation from local government and everything related to, the commissioners are strongly opposed to that. We believe that if an interim study does move forward, that we're going to find that really it's not necessary or appropriate for this method to move things forward with what I think the goals are in place here. We've said before, and I think we'll apply it to 2 things that are based on discussion today, that we really are the innovation zone already. We've said that in the past because we really believe it. You look at Tesla, Google, Switch, about 20 million other square feet of companies out at Tahoe Reno Industrial Center and otherwise really prove it. They've come to us. Because we're fast, we're expedient, we're easy to work with. And then the proponents talk about a sandbox, where the best minds of the world can work on innovative technology and those sorts of things. And we couldn't agree more that Story County is the best place for that to happen. We have a development agreement at a place at Tahoe Reno Industrial Center that for 50 years locks in zoning, locks in the codes of 1999, everything in place so there's a predictable environment for companies to grow out there, and that applies to much of the land owned by the proponents. Our zoning out there, all of it supports that. Going back to water, we put the tax increment area together and supported the affluent line transfer. We believe that this provided Washoe Reno Sparks about $100 million benefit by not having to build a water treatment facility that would treat nitrates to the level that are required by the EPA. Instead, they send that affluent water to Tri-Center for Industrial Development. And at the same time, Tri-Center, or the Tri-GID, whichever, donated 1,500 acre-feet upstream of clean water to be put back into the river so that not only was the dirty water not going in, but also clean water was going in to further clarify EPA standards for the Truckee River. So it's really, we were excited about it because everybody benefited. Story County, Tri-Center, Reno, Sparks, Washoe, it was an amazing project that's good for everybody. And then we supported SB 1, if you remember, that this legislature approved in the past with regard to data centers and allowing that innovative technology to come to Northern Nevada. And all these companies, including the blockchains group, will get the same treatment as the other. The guaranteed 30-day building permit, the 5-day grading permit, and then following all necessary state regulation, all that, for making sure environmental matters are covered. The second thing that's most important, I think, in this conversation is really housing that's being brought up. And I kind of want to put a special emphasis on that, is the Board of County Commissioners has expressed, and we do here, that we're in support of the housing and the smart city, quote unquote, that's being proposed. But I think what's more important about that is that the 2016 master plan that's written with goals and objectives and illustrations and narrative writing to describe what this community is to be like at Painted Rock, I think it's a written document that was not only written by staff, approved by the board and the Planning Commission, and went through an exhaustive 7-year process with 3 years of intensity through all of our communities, and our communities all supported this. And then even more so in 2006, a proposal to build mixed-use residential, kind of like a modern high-density housing development, was approved by the Story County Commissioners and by the Planning Commission, as this is what we want to see. And because of the state of the economy, unfortunately, it wasn't able to get built. So we wrote that master plan to not only support it, but it even references that 2006 project to show this is really what we want. We did it before. Please support doing it again. And the renditions I said before of high density and high rise stainless steel and all the exciting things that you see in the smart city renditions that you see with the Blockchains Group and our partners, this is what we would like to see for Painted Rock. We're not looking for ranch houses and horse properties and equestrian. We have places for that. We want to see this kind of thing as a workforce development, Generation Z, Generation Millennial, people that are working out at Tri, and more importantly, people that are really interested in innovative technology and doing things. We do provide a reminder that this type of development is developer-driven. We are a county, we can't build it, but we can support those who do want to come build it. And I want to remind us that no master plan amendment is needed for this, and we go right through the process. So I'll conclude. We really kind of think if a study was to move forward, it should compare the progress that such a project would make if the innovation zone legislation were to be approved versus just going through Story County's existing framework that's already set up for their success. In the meantime, we do encourage the applicants to submit an application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're still in neutral, so we'll go to you next. Thanks.
Thank you, Acting Chair Benitez Thompson and committee members. For the record, my name is Clay Mitchell, spelled C-L-A-Y-M-I-T-C-H-E-L-L, and I am a Story County Commissioner. We're grateful to be included in this discussion and thankful for the insightful questions and concerns expressed by the committee. We're particularly thankful to the Governor's Office for the inclusion of local jurisdiction governance and taxation elements in the scope of the study, as both the potential impacts and the opportunities are substantial with a proposal like this. I'm going to echo just a couple of the ideas that my county manager had just mentioned. First of all, we're supportive of a study process and look forward to being active participants. We are testifying in neutral on this resolution because we maintain that at least in the case of the proposed project that we've been discussing here, a separate, new, and untested political subdivision is unnecessary to accomplish the proponent's stated goals. Further, Story County is ideally suited as a venue for a project like this, including the residential element. Despite assertions to the contrary, our economic development climate is anything but stagnant. We have implemented several unique and creative structures within Story County to accommodate some of these developments, some of the biggest companies and developments in the world, and will continue to explore ways to facilitate innovation within the county, either through a committee study or independent of it. In Story County, the doors are open and we're prepared and enthusiastic to facilitate innovative projects such as the one proposed by Blockchains through the existing structures and authorities at our disposal. And we look forward to the impact conversation that Majority Leader Benitez Thompson has been championing. Those discussions are long overdue. Thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Hello, Will Adler representing the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe today. Pyramid Lake would like to first refer you to the letter written by the chairwoman, Janet Davis. That should be available as an exhibit on the record. And then secondarily, we'd like to just first thank the Governor's Office and the sponsors of the Measure SCR 11 for the inclusion of tribal concerns in the bill and the issues specifically to Pyramid Lake, which pertain mostly to water and the studying of water and the impacts to water in the area regarding innovation zones. Thank you. And Pyramid Lake is neutral on this bill.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I guess we will, seeing any more neutral from the room? No more neutral in the room. We'll go to neutral on the phones.
If you would like to provide testimony in neutral position to Senate Concurrent Resolution 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide neutral testimony to Senate Concurrent Resolution 11, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Vice Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers wishing to provide neutral testimony at this time.
Okay, seeing nothing else, no other neutral testimony, I guess I'll go back to the bill sponsor. Any closing remarks for us on SCR 11? No? Okay, thank you so much. So in that case, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Concurrent Resolution number 11, and we will move into public comment. So at this time, if there's anyone who wants to come on down and give public comment, we welcome it. Hello, Mrs. Echeverry.
I guess it's good evening now. Good evening, Chair and Committee. My name is Dawn Echeverry, and I have been a music teacher in Washoe County for 28 years. I am currently serving as the Vice President of the Nevada State Education Association. Since last summer's special session, educators have lined the streets in front of the legislature and called in for public comment. Their ask, listen to educators, and put AJR 1 up for a public hearing. AJR 1, which passed in the 32nd special session, would generate around $450 million in new revenue annually. Again, listen to educators and send AJR 1 to the ballot and let Nevada voters decide. Thank you.
I just have to say, you haven't just been a teacher for did you say 27 years? Was that long? 28, but you were my music teacher in middle school. I think I was when you were a new teacher in your first year at Clayton Middle School. Go Cubs. Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Reading a couple of additional public comments from educators regarding education funding in support of AJR 1. Kalen Evans is a teacher in Washoe County, president of Empower Nevada Teachers, and an NSA member. He writes, I want to start off by thanking legislators who have been working to allocate additional funding for education. The action taken in the past week on the K-12 budget is a much-needed first step in addressing the drastic lack of funding for our education system. As you know, though, our own funding commission has recommended increasing education funding by $2 billion a year for us to reach an adequate funding level and get us near the national average. The addition of $500 million to the governor's budget, while very much needed and appreciated, only gets us back to current year per pupil funding levels. So we need to continue to invest more in our education system. Reaching this goal will not happen overnight, but we have a great opportunity to move forward by passing AJR 1 and allowing Nevadans to vote on whether they feel an increase to the money tax is appropriate to help fund education, health care, and other government agencies. Tammy Wolf is a special education teacher in the Clark County School District and an NSEA member. She writes, I am in my third year at CCSD teaching students with disabilities. I would love to finish my career here in Nevada, but the lack of funding of our education system is incredibly discouraging. It was astonishing to walk into a classroom with no curriculum and few supplies, coupled with large class sizes and caseloads. As a special education teacher, the disservice that is being done to students due to a lack of funding is of deep concern. There have been instances where students are placed in a special education program, but they could have stayed in general education if the teacher had a little more time with the student. I attribute this to large class sizes and lack of funding Nevada doesn't provide for our students. We can't expect to move even one spot from 48 if we decide not to properly fund our students. Please support AJR 1. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daly. All right, go ahead.
Brian Rippett for the record. I am a 20-plus year chemistry and physics teacher in Douglas County, currently serving as president of the Nevada State Education Association. And I would like to reinforce the comments on additional funding for education. Very recently, we were excited about the $500 million put back from the governor's budget, and it's been labeled as an investment in education. But upon further review, it really appears to be more of a maintenance, getting back to almost where we were last year. Just some numbers from the paperwork from the LCB in the BDRs and the laws themselves. The new funding will bring the per average state total, all funds, to $10,204. In the law passed 2 years ago for the 2021 year, it was 10,319. So it's an effective reduction of $115 per student. And so in order to get to better than 48th, we're going to have to truly invest, and time is running out on our 10-year timeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the phone lines for public comment.
If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 358, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hello, my name is Selena LaRue Hatch, LA_RUE_HATCH. I'm a teacher and a member of WEA and NSCA, and I am calling to urge this committee to give AJR1 the hearing that it deserves and pass it along to the voters. With less than a week left in this session, there is no time to waste. It is no secret that Nevada needs new revenue and has needed new revenue for as long as any of us can remember. Our schools are critically underfunded and our social safety net is virtually non-existent. And yet when our leaders are presented with a popular, fair way to raise revenue in this state, we are hearing nothing but crickets. It is incomprehensible why we've hit the 114th day of session and this measure still hasn't even been heard. Many of the people in this room have already voted for AJR1. We're not asking you to change your values or your positions, just to finish what you started last summer. This measure is so long overdue and clearly popular with Nevadans, as evidenced by the thousands of emails, hundreds of protesters, hours of public comment, and overwhelming polling results you have all seen since its introduction last summer. And of course, it is popular. The mines in Nevada make a fortune from our resources while paying a pittance in taxes to support the state that makes those profits possible. It is time that they start paying their fair share in this state, just like the rest of us. This morning, a trio of voting measures were heard in Assembly Ways and Means. These bills show this body's commitment to democracy, and I applaud them. But AJR1 is no different. There is no difference between allowing all Nevadans to vote for their leaders and allowing them to vote for their Constitution. We are asking that you allow Nevadans to vote on this measure. Allow our voices to be heard. If you believe that Nevadans want to see new revenue, then let us pass this measure. If you believe that Nevadans don't want new revenue, then trust Nevadans and let them vote it down. Either way, it is time to trust Nevadans, trust democracy, and let Nevadans vote. Thank you.
If you would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Vice Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers wishing to provide public comment at this time.
Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll go ahead and close out this Assembly revenue hearing. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Appreciate your time. And then the chair will post for whenever the next hearing is, whenever, so just keep your eyes out for it. Thank you so much.